That's a washing machine.
What does it wash?
Clothes.
Can you imagine?
What can the TV show 1923 teach us about economic growth and changes in living standards? My name's Matt Rosu. I'm Dean of the Sigmund Weiss School of Business and a professor of economics at Susquehanna University, and I like making economics fun and accessible, often using pop culture like today. Let's examine a short clip from 1923, then we'll be back to talk about the economic lessons.
I know the Parkers.
Mary Parker told me they have a telephone in their house. In her house. Can you imagine? When Albert goes to Bozeman, he can stop by the telegram office, and for a nickel, he can call Mary at her house so she knows he got there safe. Well, no, I'm just saying, it would be nice to know that you got there safe, instead of hoping you made it safe, and wondering and worrying.
Well, if you...
The idea that there could be a telephone in the house is so fascinating and new, and can't even believe that somebody, a loved one could go on a trip, arrive in a different town, and make a call that would cost a nickel, which is a lot more than now, and let everybody know got there okay. This is a great opportunity to talk about the change in living standards we've seen. First, this is 1923, of course, title of the show. And in 1923, the living standards already were much greater than they had been the previous 20, 40, 60 years. And that's because of a lot of the economic growth that had happened. There's economic freedom in the United States. And with that, we saw growth in manufacturing. We saw actually a decrease in hours worked even through the 1920s. And some new inventions were created that helped make people better off, including the telephone. So telephones are becoming more commonplace. Even in the 1920s, the early adoption phase, at least in rural America. And with that, new opportunities to make life easier and new opportunities to enjoy life. We'd seen economic growth emerge. But one thing that's really fun to think about is just how dramatically things have changed from the 100 years ago to today. Now we take for granted that we could send a quick text message across the world in no time flat for essentially zero additional cost. Yeah, there's the monthly plan fee, but then no extra additional cost, and the message gets through to anybody. Or same thing with a phone call, same thing with talking over the internet. How have things changed in the past 100 years? It's pretty amazing to think about that. I will have more to say about this, but let's watch a second clip from 1923 that talks about some of the progress that's happening in the world.
Are you selling electricity in the valley?
Yes, ma'am. We'll run the cable as they pave the road to the park.
So they're paving the road to the park?
All the way from Canada to Mexico.
What is that?
That's a washing machine.
What does it wash?
Clothes.
Can you imagine?
An electric motor spins the cylinder as water is pumped through the machine. Soap is added here, and the agitation removes any soiling.
What does that wash?
That's a refrigerator. The top compartment keeps food frozen, and the bottom compartment maintains a temperature of 38 degrees.
We don't need any of these things.
Well, they're conveniences. Their use gives you time to do other things.
What other things?
Well, like other chores.
So you invent machines to do those, then what do we do?
Go on a picnic. Go for a swim. Go to the cinema. You can enjoy a more leisurely life. This is the future. Every home in New York City has electricity. They have refrigerators, and some even have electric stoves.
A washing machine seems like a good idea, I must admit.
It is the future, ma'am.
Fascinating clip that shows the washing machine and the refrigerator coming into Montana, and the idea that electricity could be pumped into the house. That was obviously a very foreign concept. The Dutton family didn't know what even to think about electricity coming into the house. Clearly, this isn't something they've ever had. They hadn't really thought about it. And there was some skepticism at first. What do we do with a washing machine? What do we do with a refrigerator? In 1923, these were legitimate questions that people were asking when these inventions came about. But I love the response from the salesperson here. He said it could increase your leisure time. And in fact, economic growth that we've seen, one of the main things it's done is it has indeed increased leisure time in America and other developed countries. In the 1870s, the average American worked over 3,000 hours per year, as we could see in this chart. And it differed a bit across countries, but the number of hours worked per year was still enormously high. By the time 1923 was set, actually, the economic growth and the increases in efficiency we'd seen in those 50 years from 1870 to 1920, 1923 is when this is set, had dropped the number of labor hours per year down to 2,500 per year. That's still a lot more than today, but that's a pretty big drop. What is promised out of the washing machine? Well, it's leisure time. It's time to do more of what you want to do. And if you think about the things that we have today to clean, right, between vacuum cleaners, washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, and all of the other modern conveniences, a lot of it is designed for us to have more leisure time, to get tasks done more efficiently. So that is a key aspect of economic growth that we've seen. A second key thing to note here, the power of electricity in making the world a better place. In many ways, electricity is like a prerequisite for further economic growth. One of my favorite pictures to show ever is the picture of North versus South Korea. So is this a chicken versus an egg thing? Is it the economic growth that causes the electricity, or the electricity that causes the economic growth? Well, really, there's a little bit of both here. But electricity is enormously powerful and important in many, many ways. There are people who live in areas where the hospitals don't have power all the time, because there's not enough electricity to power a hospital 24 hours a day. I mean, this is literally resulting in people dying, right? Electricity is so crucially important, and it's fun to see how it's integrated into 1923. I mentioned a couple key aspects of economic growth. One is the increase in leisure time that we see, but the second key thing to note is the big increase in well-being. So chart on here from U.S. Federal Reserve shows median household income since the 80s. And we see about a 37% increase in inflation-adjusted household income since the mid-80s. But if we took this back to the mid-1920s, the best estimates seem to be around $5,000 or $6,000 per household. In the early to mid-1920s, compared to today of $80,000 per household. That is tough, actually, for me to even get my mind around. But if you start to think a little bit, it makes sense. Now, the Dutton family in 1923, they were rich for the time. So they have this beautiful house, and it might fool you into thinking, oh, their living standards didn't seem so bad. And true, maybe theirs weren't so bad, but they were among the richest of the time. And still, they had no electricity. Did they have indoor plumbing? I don't think they did. Did they have, of course they didn't have cell phones, computers, televisions, any of the modern conveniences that we think of today, they didn't have. So there's an interesting economic question that many economics professors, myself included, will often throw to the students within a class is, are you richer than Rockefeller? And the idea is, if you take anybody 100 years ago, take the richest person in the world, and take somebody who's even below average in wages in a country like the United States, are you richer than the richest person 100 years ago? I mean, they had no access to, maybe electricity they did have, but imagine life without televisions, without computers, without the instant access to news sources, without penicillin. without many of the modern medical treatments. And there are some people who say, you know what, I'll take all the leisure, all the space, all the people working for me, and I'll give up some stuff and they'd be happy. But there are many people, myself included, who would think that literally an average income in the United States makes you richer than any person, including the richest in the world, 100 years ago or before. So the economic growth that we see emerging in this moment of time, it just keeps going within the United States and many other developed countries, to the fact where the average, the middle household in America is 13 times richer than the middle household in the 1920s. There's indoor plumbing that's ubiquitous. Housings, accommodations are bigger. Cars available much better than they used to be 100 years ago. Almost every aspect of life is noticeably better. And that translates into our higher living standards. Fun little exercise for you to think about before I close. In the past 100 years, incomes have gone up about 13 times for the average American family. What will life be like if 100 years from now they go up another 13 times? And the average household is making $1 million a year. That's the middle household. And that I'm talking, when I'm mentioning this isn't inflated dollars. This is after adjusting for inflation. It's pretty crazy to think about. So I'll leave you with that. And want to thank you for watching as well. So once again, I try to make economics fun and accessible, often using pop culture. This is part of a series examining economic lessons through 1923. Videos are going to drop during season 2, so please like, subscribe, click the notifications bell. If you have any comments, feedback, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you in the next video.